Good morning. We look at John 6, verses 1 through 21 this morning. And Jesus has been doing ministry. People are following him. And after Jesus is finding himself a little bit on the outs with some of the Jews again, he goes, it says, to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, or the Sea of Tiberias. He's going over to, I suppose, the east side now, since he's kind of been on the west coast. But even though he goes from one side of the lake to the other side of the lake or the sea, people follow him. It says a large crowd kept following him. Why? Because they saw the signs that he was doing. They saw the healing of the sick. They saw the many miraculous things that Jesus was able to do that no doctor, no human could do. And it was done, with love and compassion and care, and with no qualifications of the person other than for that person to be sick. But people were following him. And then it says in verse 3 that Jesus went up the mountain and sat down there with his disciples. And in Matthew's gospel, this would be the time when we would have the Sermon on the Mountain, kind of basically, and then what we have coming up here next in John is the feeding of the 5,000. And this is the only miracle of Jesus that is recorded in all four gospels. It's in Matthew 14, Mark 6, and Luke 9. So it's one of those things that, I always thought that the Gospels were so similar. And Matthew, Mark, and Luke are called the Synoptic Gospels, which means they are synonymous with each other. And John is written in a different viewpoint and in so different many ways, but I didn't realize how much difference there was even in the Synoptic Gospels. But for this miracle to be the only one recorded, it had to be something special, I would think, and Jesus was on the mountain sitting there with his disciples, and it says the Passover was near. So remember in John 2, when John tells us that Jesus cleansed the temple and all of that, this was the Passover festival. So we're basically 1 year now into Jesus' ministry, because it was at the Passover. He went to Jerusalem, and now it's again the Passover. So Jesus has been doing his ministry for a year among these people, and so he's getting quite a crowd, quite a following. And think about the people that he has impacted in that 1 year's time. So the festival of the Passover is near. So again, Jesus is going to be on his way to Jerusalem shortly. But Jesus looks up, it says, he sees a large crowd coming toward him, and he turns to Philip with a question. Where are we going to get enough bread to feed all of these people? Philip is, he's one of the disciples that we don't hear a lot about. But right here, Jesus puts him on the spot. And John tells us he said this to test him, for Jesus, knew what he was going to do. And Philip, responds truthfully. 6 months' wages would hardly buy enough bread for each of them to get a little. You think about that. 6 months' wages. So you think about how much you make in 6 months, and then to say that, to spend that much money on food would hardly feed the crowd that was there. And, so the reality is that, it's insurmountable. The disciples just don't have the ability, don't have the resources. There's nothing they could do to satisfy the hunger of all of these people. But it says, Jesus knew what he was going to do. But Philip is aware of this one boy. This got, it says, 5 barley loaves. He says, one of his disciples, Andrew, I guess, Simon Peter's brother, is the one that says, there's a boy here with 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. But what are they among so many? And you know how that story goes. Jesus tells the people, has them tell the people to sit down, because there was a lot of area there for the people to sit. And then he blesses this barley loaves, these 5 barley loaves, a poor boy's bread, poor people's bread, barley. and he blesses this food, and he has his disciples distribute it. And when they're all done eating, Jesus says, go pick up the leftovers. Leftovers? Five barley loaves and 2 fish for 5,000 people, and he expects leftovers. But the disciples don't argue. They go and they collect 12 baskets. There is more left over than there was to start. And, the picking up, the gathering of the leftover is, I think, paying a tribute, paying a thanks, saying thank you for this miracle. Thank you for this blessing of this food, Thank you for this gift of abundance, rather than just to say, well, these crumbs can just lay on the ground or whatever. But Jesus has them gather up the remnants. And I think that's, just honoring the abundance of God. I don't need all of God's attention, just a little bit. I don't need to have God focus on me all of the time, but I need to have him know who I am. And he does. And that's such a great thing to know. But, all of that left over. And then in verse 14 says, when the people saw the sign that he had done, they began to say, this is indeed the prophet who has come into the world. So Jesus has been doing these miracles and healing people and everything in these people's sights for a year. They've been witnessing for nearly a year by this time. And there are more and more of them coming to profess, to say, to speak that this is the Messiah. This is the one to come, And then in verse 15, John tells us that Jesus realizes that the people were getting ready to take him and to put him on the kingship, to take him by force and make him king. But he withdrew again to the mountain by himself. He had that ability, even when he was among all of the people, just to kind of fade away and be out of the limelight and to be, they can't find him. But he fades away and goes back up on the mountain and I'm assuming gives thanks to God for the blessings of the abundant food and all of that. And then the disciples get in the boat, and they start going across to the sea to Capernaum. It says it's dark and Jesus had not yet come to them. So, the disciples get in the boat and they start across the lake and Jesus is up on the mountain yet. And it's one of those things that, Jesus tells them to take off, but, they got to wonder, well, how is he going to catch up to us? It's going to take him a while to get, we can go across it faster. Maybe they rode for 3 or 4 hours. And the winds became rough because a strong wind had been coming. And then they see Jesus coming, walking across the sea. And they were afraid. But he says, do not be afraid, it is I. And it says they wanted to take him into the boat, and immediately the boat reached the land on the other side. So, did Jesus get in the boat or not? It says they wanted to take him into the boat. That's what my Bible says anyway. Maybe yours says something different, but he was walking on the sea, coming near the boat. They were terrified. It is I, do not be afraid. And they want to take him in the boat, and the boat reaches safety. The boat reaches shore. It's when we have Jesus in our lives, when we invite Jesus to live each day with us, and we don't have to do that. He's there. He's always there. But when we acknowledge, it's so hard to say that in different ways because it puts responsibility on us. And there is some responsibility on us. We can say no to God. And it's just, I shared not so long ago that, heaven is full of people who accept Jesus and hell is full of people who reject Jesus. We can reject Jesus. We can accept Jesus. It's there and he's there. But I think part of this lesson that we can learn from the disciples wanting to take him in the boat reaching the other side, the security of shore. They were out on the sea, waves, wind, just caught up in all the chaos of the nighttime, not being able to see, not being, probably weren't able to see how far they were from shore. They didn't have street lights and yard lights and lighthouses and stuff at that point in time. So they knew they were on the sea, but where were they? And how close to shore were they? And how much could they really see when in the dark? And that's the way it is sometimes in our lives. You know, the chaos and everything that's going on, you know, things can look pretty dark and things can look pretty bleak. And when we're in the dark, which, I mean, it's not very often so dark we can't see, but we don't see nearly as clearly in the dark. And when Jesus, you know, comes more fully into our lives, just as when Jesus showed up there with the disciples, things are better. I just can't help but think that everyone's life would be better for knowing Jesus. I truly believe that everyone's life would be better, is better, because of knowing Jesus. And so this is where we finished today. The boat reached the land where they were going. Safety, security. You know, I know people who are really reluctant to get into a boat because of the water and the fear of the depth, or to get on an airplane, and so many different things that are just quite not safe feeling for them. And when they can put their feet on solid ground again, they feel so much better. Jesus is that solid ground. May he lead and guide you and walk with you today.